Unit 7. Success. Recording 1.
Hello and welcome back to the Focus podcast. I'm Jenny Osman, the editor of Focus, the monthly science and technology magazine from the BBC. He's the hugely influential author of Blink and the Tipping Point. His work is quoted by academics, presidents and your mates down the pub. And now Malcolm Gladwell has turned that deft mind of his to a new subject, the science of success. In his new book, Outliers, Gladwell argues that if we want to be successful, we should think less about what successful people are like and more about where they have come from and the opportunities they have had along the way. Now, Ian's read the book and he joins me now. Now, his new book is looking at success.
Yes, and what he says is that if we think about somebody like Bill Gates, hugely successful person, and we want to learn from his achievements, then what do we look at? We look at what that man is like. You know, what drives him? What does he do on a day-to-day basis? How can we be more like him? But what Gladwell argues in the new book is that we should pay less attention to that side of stuff and look at where Bill Gates came from.
So
how did he
history.
get to where he got to, the opportunities he had along the way. And what he says is that Bill Gates has one thing in common with another very, very successful group of people, the Beatles.
So what's that?
Well, they both practice what they do, and they practiced a lot.
Right. So what does that? How much is a lot?
A lot is 10,000 hours. That's like the magic number. If you're going to become world-class at anything in the world,
Okay.
you need to put 10,000 hours practicing. So the Beatles, they were doing gigs, you know, like all-night gigs in Hamburg in these little clubs, and just the number of hours they put in on the stage allowed them to master their craft. And the same with Bill Gates. He, as he was growing up, got into computer programming, and through a very fortunate series of events, he was able to program and program and program, and again, kind of build up
Because he had
that 10
access to
hours.
computers at the time
Absolutely.
when the
Exactly.
the field was developing, I
Timing
guess.
as well is
Right.
so important. You know, you just happen to go to a university where he'd have access to a computer programming unit. I mean, this was, you know, back in the 60s and 70s when computers were you know, the size of rooms and stuff. And so what Gladwell does, you know, throughout the book is pick up on these little nuances that we really need to go back and look at again if we're really to understand why successful people are as successful as they are.
I think the 10,000 hours magic number is really interesting because, as you know, I used to play tennis professionally and I hit a load of tennis balls when I was little, and I'm sure I must have done 10,000 hours worth. You know, I used to play like 4 hours a day and stuff. And I remember speaking to Martina Hingis's mum about why she thought her kid was so good and such a prodigy. And she basically said, my daughter has been hitting tennis balls since the age of 3, and she has hit X number of tennis balls for X number of hours. And it's, you know, I'm sure so kind of once you're over that magic number of 10,000...
The same goes for people like Beethoven. It's incredible how broad.
But at the end of
this
the day,
is.
you've got to have talent.
You do
got
have to have
the raw
talent. You have to have belief in what you can do, and you have to have the will to put those hours in. But you also need the opportunity.
Unit 7. Recording 2. 1.
I've been writing books for years, but I haven't written a bestseller yet.
Two.
They've been playing music for hours. I can't get to sleep.
3.
I've always loved art, but I'm not very good at it.
4.
She hasn't been studying a lot because she's been ill.
5.
How long have you known Sheila?
6.
I've been learning Mandarin for 2 years.
7,
I've had my own car since I was 20.
8,
Will Smith? I've never heard of him.
Unit 7, Recording 3. 1,
He's an expert in Italian art.
2,
He's gifted at painting.
3,
She has a lot of ability as a dancer.
4,
She's the most skillful footballer I've ever seen.
5,
He has an aptitude for maths.
6,
He is a really talented musician.
7,
I'm hopeless at geography.
8,
I'm useless at bull sports.
Unit 7, Recording 4.
So, what about your memory, Peggy? How good is it?
It's okay, which is lucky because I need to remember lots of things.
Like what?
Well, I'm a sales rep for a publishing company, so I'm usually out visiting schools trying to sell books.
So you need to remember what exactly?
Oh, lots of things. The worst thing when I started was just trying to remember how to get to these schools in my car. I used to get lost all the time. I'm not very good at directions. Then, once you're there, you have to remember the names and faces of the people you're talking to. I once spent a whole hour calling this woman Sally when her name was Samantha.
And she didn't tell you?
For some reason, she didn't tell me. And then there's all the product information.
Product information? What, the books?
Yes, we sell about 500 different books, and I have to know the difference between all of them. I mean, it gets easier, thank goodness, but I still make mistakes occasionally. What about you, John? You're an actor, right?
Yeah, the main thing I have to remember is my lines. Fortunately, I've got a good memory for words, and I don't find it that hard to memorise them, so... I mean, yeah... the other thing you have to remember when you're in the theatre is the blocking.
What's that?
Blocking? It's where you stand or move to, you know? Like when you say a word, you might have to walk quickly across the stage or move in front of someone. It's all planned, and you have to remember it.
Oh, I see.
But it's funny. For other things, I have a terrible memory. I'm totally useless. I always forget birthdays and dates. I'm always late for things. It's just, yeah, luckily I'm okay with my lines.
What about you, Tim?
I'm probably the same as all other students. At least all other history students. I have to memorise dates and also names. But it's not that difficult because you read about them so much you can't really forget them. But for other things, I have a really bad memory. I can never remember jokes or films. Sometimes I'm watching a film, and after an hour, I realise I've seen it already. I'm completely hopeless like that.
Oh, me too. No, tell me about it.
Unit 7, Recording 5.
It's interesting. One of the most intelligent people I know is a 10-year-old boy from Egypt. He doesn't go to school, and he works on a street in Cairo, in one of the touristy areas, and he sells things like small statues of the pyramids, things like that, to tourists. Now, the reason I say he's intelligent is that he can sell you something in about 15 languages. I once spent an afternoon watching him, and it was incredible. Most of the time he uses English, but he guesses where you're from by looking at you, and then he starts speaking. He can speak just a little bit of French, Spanish, Japanese, Italian, German, etc. It's amazing. He knows just enough in all these languages to say hello and sell you something.
How did he learn the languages?
I asked him that, and he said he learned them by talking to tourists.
That is quite amazing.
So anyway, that's my example. Like I said, he doesn't go to school, but for me, he is super intelligent. What about you?
I can think of loads of people who don't have any qualifications but are able to do really difficult things. I've got a friend, for example, who built his own house. He just taught himself how to do it, bought a piece of land, bought the materials and the equipment, and just did it. No qualifications, no certificates, no university degree. In my view, that's a real practical kind of intelligence.
I couldn't do that.
Let me give you another example. I've got another friend who takes parts of old cars and makes new cars from them. He does it at the weekend as a way to relax. And the new car actually works.
I couldn't do that either.
I wouldn't know where to start. And this is someone who left school at 15 to do an apprenticeship. But, you know, having said that, I do think qualifications are useful in some ways. I mean, for one thing, they show that you are able to complete a course, that you're motivated and committed enough.
Yeah, I think that's true.
But I must say, real-life experience, travelling, going out and meeting people, talking, I think these give you an amazing education too.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. Just like the boy from Egypt.
Unit 7. Recording 6. 1,
In my view,
2,
I do think,
3,
I must say,
4,
for one thing,
Unit 7. Recording 7. 1,
in my view, that's a real practical kind of intelligence.
2,
I do think qualifications are useful in some ways.
3,
I must say, real-life experience, travelling and meeting people give you an amazing education too.
4,
For one thing, they show you are able to complete a course.
Unit 7. Recording 8.
A couple of years ago, I learnt how to scuba dive, which was really exciting, really good experience. And when you're learning, half of the training is in the classroom and half is a practical in a swimming pool. So the classroom stuff was fine. I found it really quite easy. I was learning with my mum and she was really worried about doing the kind of more academic stuff and passing the exam, but I found that part okay. It was the practical stuff that I had trouble with, and she was really lucky. She was really good. But you go and you learn all the technical stuff, you know, how to go under the water, how to clear your mask if you get water in it, that kind of thing. And then you have to do 2 dives outside in a kind of reservoir or a quarry or, you know, something like that. But obviously, because I'm in the UK, it was really, really cold. And we woke up on the morning of our dive and there was ice on the water. So when we got there, we were very nervous and didn't want to get into the water. But once I was in, it was so freezing that I tried to go under the water. But the more I tried, the harder it got. And then I got very frustrated and started to cry. And then all my ears got blocked up and I couldn't get under. But eventually I managed it and went down, passed my test, did all of the skills that you need to do. Despite the fact I was so terrible at it, I managed to pass. And now I'm passed, I can go anywhere I want, so I'll make sure it will be somewhere very hot. So, to sum up, although it was a really difficult challenge, I'm so glad I managed it. For me, it was quite an achievement, and I'm proud of myself for having done it.